Hello, I'm Daniela Elana, and in episode 79 of Historical Paranormal, we'll examine the legend of the Yeti or abominable snowman. The Yeti is much bigger than the average human being, but way before the Yeti's description caught everyone's attention as it does today. Hergers, Shipton, and Tibet led the narrative on portraying that the Yeti exists and infused the mythical creature with human characteristics such as being lonely, brooding, free, and kind, yet deeply misunderstood due to his size. Scientists have long been skeptical about Yeti's existence, which is why it is also called the abominable snowman. According to Daniel Caper, PhD and associate professor of religion at the University of Southern Mississippi, the first mention of the Yeti in the English-speaking world came from Brian H. Hodgson. Hodgson was a representative of the British living Cathamundu's royal courts between 1820 and 1843, with Nepalese assistants who told him the first stories of the Yeti. Back then, he was described as a wild man who moved erectly, was covered with long, dark hair, and had no tail. It wasn't until 1889 that Major Lawrence A. Waddell reported finding the wild man's footprints, and then sometime around 1904, there was the first sighting. William Hugh Knight, a British soldier stationed near the Indian city of Gangtok City, saw the creature, who he added fortunately didn't see him. In 1921, British explorer Charles Howard Bury found footsteps of the Yeti near Lakpa, La Paz, while on an expedition in the Himalayas. The incident is mentioned in the book Mount Everest, The Reconnaissance, 1921. Bury said that he found the imprints of a human-like creature among the footsteps of animals and later got to know from the locals about the legend of a race of wild hairy men living found in the wildest and most inaccessible mountains. He described it in 1921, telling Times he was a little under 6 feet, almost stark, naked and bitter cold. He was kind of pale yellow all over, a shock of matted hair on his head, little hair on his face, highly splayed feet, and large, formidable hands. His muscular development in his arms, thighs, legs, back, and chest were terrific. In 1951, Eric Shipton, a highly respected British explorer, first spotted the giant footprint in the 50s, which led the world to be enchanted by the possibility of a mystery that we now call as Yeti. When he brought back the footprint image, no one raised the question about the authenticity. His reputation clearly preceded his discovery of something that remained almost unimaginable to the human mind. But Eric Shipton, on his part, was determined to keep exploring until he could decode the mystery of the Yeti. The Indian Army also set out to find the Yeti. Expedition team claimed that it had spotted gigantic footprints of Yeti, which was commonly known as the mythical beast. Given the footprints were 32 by 15 inches in size, it caught the entire world's attention. When the additional Directorate General Public Information official Twitter handle tweeted that the footprint of the elusive snowman has been sighted at Makalu Byrne National Park, and report today the ANI has cited the Hadrum-based mountaineer Taran Goel, sharing his insights about sensing voices of creatures and strange movements, which he conveys can be similar to the Yeti or other mythical creatures. Another mountaineer, Manjul Rawat, called for more evidence that can help and corroborate Yeti's existence. The current debate around Yeti is the context of gigantic footprints spotted close to Makalu Base Camp on April 9th by an expedition team in the Indian Army. Other searches that have went on are another mountaineer, Reinhold Messner, also undertook an arduous journey to find the Yeti, spanning 12 years. After more than a decade, Messner published a book titled My Quest for the Yeti. In 1957, another explorer, Peter Byrne, who was part of the Slick expedition heading to the Everest, is known to have swapped Yeti hand bones for human bones and smuggled the original bones to England reportedly for analysis, but the test result remained inconclusive. Every continent but Antarctica has legends of a Yeti. In Russia, there are mysterious Yeti-like creatures called almasty. In the 1870s, local landowners in a remote part of the Caucasus region of Russia claimed they had caught one. They named her Xana and kept her captive for years, during which she was described as very big, strong, her whole body covered with hair. Xana gave birth to 4 children during her captivity, and some of her descendants are still alive today. In 2013, University of Oxford professor human genetic Brian Skies tested samples of her living descendants' DNA, along with DNA taken from the tooth of her son. Contrary to claims that she was a Neanderthal or Almasi, he found via Channel 4 that she seems to have been 100% sub-Saharan African. Examining the skull of her son, Kuwait, he found found that there were some ancient characteristics like elevated brow ridge, suggesting that she was perhaps a remnant of an earlier human migration out of Africa and not in Almaty, Tibet. Go back to the older Tibetan tales of the Yeti and you'll find something incredible. They were invaluable participants in the Buddhist faith. According to Professor Daniel Caper, stories include ones like the one told by Elana Dorje, a 17th century Sherpa religious leader. He wrote that a young man, he decided he wanted to found monasteries through the Kamabue region. Seeking guidance, he retreated to a cave and began to meditate. It's typical for people to provide meditating religious men with food and water, but Sangwa Dorje Carrere was a Yeti. Not only did the Yeti bring him food, water, and fuel for his fire, but he also started learning the ways of Buddha and became a disciple. When the Yeti died, Sangwa Dorje kept his scalp in a hand, moving the sacred relic to a place of honor in the monastery of Pangubichi Gompa. In Bhutan, his story isn't always one of devout Yetis, and it is believed that in the middle of the night, when all humans were gone and sleeping, Yetis would care for a temple devotee to Pandan Lamu, a protection deity. They would steal in under the cover of darkness, clean and refill offering bowls, make sure the lamps were full, and disappear before the sun rose and the people returned. According to Professor Daniel Caper, the original Yetis of the Himalayan region were actually super nice. Temple art in Tibet depicts them as happy, smiling creatures that are very human-like, and there's a ton of stories about the kindness of individual Yetis, even likening them to bodhisattvas, Buddhist figures who devote their lives to ending suffering and helping others achieve enlightenment. Yetis were well known in the Himalayan country for helping travelers lost in the mountains and repaying kindness with kindness. They're considered not fully human, but something more than an animal too. In artwork depicting the pattern of rebirth and reincarnation, many meditational artworks show the Yeti existing in their own separate category below humans, yet above animals capable of thought and kindness. The Lepcha are a group of people who lived in eastern Nepal, western Bhutan, and West Bengal, India. They too tell tales of the Yeti, but for them, he's a little different. According to transcultural encounters in the Himalayan borderlands, the Lepcha give the Yeti another name, Chumung, or glacier spirit. Chumung is their god of the hunt and the creature of the forest. In the early 1930s, a young zoologist named Ernest Schaefer was living the high life as what Der Spiegel described as the Indiana Jones of zoology, courted by both the US and Germany for his scientific and hunting know-how. In what he later called his biggest mistake, he chose poorly. He was summoned back to Germany in 1936 and threw in with Heinrich Himmler. Himmler brought him into contact with the Abernerby Society, who believed in a Nordic Atlantic original culture that would have been destroyed when a moon collided with the Earth. They also believed that remnants of the race survived in the Himalayas and soon mounted and funded an expedition, at least in part, find remnants of that race, for in part, Schaefer was more interested in the zoologist's knowledge that was still largely hidden in Tibet. And here's where we get into Yeti territory. The expedition returned to Germany with thousands of dead birds, eggs, pelts, insects, and artifacts, along with, says The Guardian, a taxidermy bear that was believed, but only by some to be proof of a Yeti. So did the Nazis really believe it was? No, says Texas A&M University Jorge M. Gonzalez. Schaefer spent a good bit arguing that it wasn't a Yeti at all, but a Tibetan bear. There's no words on how bummed Hitler was. Chinese legends also speak of the Yeti as well. And in Bhutan, there's a national park to protect the Yeti. In 2003, Bhutan set aside a 650 square kilometer protected area called the Sakteng Wildlife Sanctuary. They did it with the help of a $700,000 grant from the MacArthur Foundation given via the World Wildlife Fund. And the specific reason for setting up a particular reserve was given as protecting the habitat of the Yeti, known in Bhutan as the Migoi or strongman. Although their official site says to protect even the mythical Yeti, and here's the thing, they're also protecting the habitat of species like the snow leopard, barking deer, the Assamese macaw, the red panda, and the Himalayan black bear. So why not throw Yeti in there too, just in case. So whether or not the Yeti exists or is a mistyped other kind of animal or human, the Yeti will remain a valuable piece of folklore in modern urban legends. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Stay tuned for next Sunday's episode. Until next time.
Eventually, the missing man calls a hotel for help. It seems he was drugged and operated on for one of his kidneys to be used in the flourishing black market for human organs. The perpetrators of the crime had left the man his hotel telephone number since he had no idea where he was. Another version goes, a group of local business people went to New York City for a weekend seminar attended by people small